not as bad as we thought. We thought the gate was going to be down. It was still up. But warning for next time, you may need to take a parking ticket, but you can validate it. So don't be turned away next time if you come. Parking, just grab the ticket, bring it in, they'll validate it for us. Anyway, welcome to the AWS Meetup. Appreciate you guys coming. We are trying to plan our next few meetups. We have a couple of meetup dates already posted on meetup.com for now. I don't know if you all heard, they are doing funny things with pricing. So anyway, we'll figure that out when the time comes. But anyway, we have the next few meetups planned. If you ever want to speak or sponsor, you absolutely should. Well, you might not want to sponsor, you have to pay out of pocket for pizza, but your company can. You can speak though. Everyone is welcome to speak. If you have done anything with AWS, we would love to hear about it. So if you just play around with it, if you tried out a service, if you've been tinkering with it, even if you think it's super basic and no one cares, people do care, and we would love to hear about it. If you just want to try speaking and want some feedback on the presentation, that kind of thing, contact us. We'd love to help you out. I'm Chris. We have Katie and Nicole in the back as well. So you can talk to them. There's a Google form if you want to fill it out to kind of just saying how long your talk is, what it would be about, that kind of thing. And same for sponsoring. So those are on the meetup page, and we'll repost those. Some events coming up. You'll notice there's not a meetup in December. That's because that is reInvent. Who's going to reInvent? Anyone? Hands? Few people. Cool. We'll be out there. We'll be wandering around in the desert. It'll be fun. With 80,000 of our closest friends. And then the other item on here, the Mid-Atlantic AWS Community Day. That is currently being planned. We don't have an exact date yet, but we're working with some of the other AWS meetups in the area. So there's one in Baltimore, there's one in Frederick, Maryland, there's one in, I don't even know where else they are. There's a bunch of them. There's like 6 or 7 around. So we're working with all of them. We're going to have like a whole day of just some talks, workshops, things like that. So we're kind of planning that out now. If you want to sponsor it, if you or your company think you might be interested in sponsoring it, we're definitely looking for sponsors right now because we're kind of working on the size and scope of things. And then we're going to have kind of a call for who wants to talk and that kind of thing. So we'll give more information to you, but that's coming up. So you should definitely be sure to check that out.
Just the one day?
I think it's just going to be one day. That's the current plan. It's just a single day. I mean, we can make it a week long if you would just take off of work and we can just hang out. You know, that's pretty cool. So that's coming up. So we'll get you more information on that. We have a couple of awesome talks today. Doug is going to talk about awsx-ray, which I personally have never messed with, but it sounds really cool. And then Vinit and Robert are going to talk to us about a hack day that they did. So they're going to talk about kind of the implementation they did and the problems they were solving. We also have pizza and beer and wine, although one is not openable because we didn't think about bringing a corkscrew, but sponsored by Feud. So we really appreciate Feud doing that. Big round of applause to Feud. And we're going to have Ricardo from Feud just going to talk for a couple minutes if you want to come up. But we really appreciate Feud buying us something. So let us swap.
Yeah. So, hello everyone. I'm Ricardo Green. I am a senior solutions architect with Feud, and it's been a while since I've actually come to this meetup, and it's grown, so this is really awesome. First of all, show of hands, positions, any cloud architects here? Solutions engineers? Sales folks? Solutions architects? Cool. I always like to get an idea, kind of just the crowd, who comes to these meetups. Really, I just want to talk a little bit about, I have 5 minutes, I believe, so just want to talk a little bit about Feud. So first of all, again, thank you for having us. We enjoy sponsoring the meetup. We've done it a couple of times. Feud itself, we're a software company. We're SaaS, built on AWS. Go ahead and plug in. Very cool. So I'll enlarge that as well. But what we do is we do security and compliance in the cloud environments, in public cloud environments. So essentially realizing that the cloud is primarily API driven by software, you can access a lot of information via the cloud API. So we do a number of different things. So really the value prop is to see where you are from a compliance and security standpoint. If you're not where you would like to be, we check about 7 different compliance standards today: HIPAA, PCI, ISO 27001, bunch of other ones, SOC 2. That's out of the box. So we check all the controls against compliance families. We give you an idea of how you are positioned as it relates to compliance. What you're looking at is our visualization tool. So via the cloud APIs, we do a number of things. We're able to see the relationship between all the infrastructure that you have, and we actually map that out. So we kind of look at this as a Google Maps for your cloud infrastructure. As you zoom in, you get additional information within that. So you can carve out, what infrastructure is in which security groups. And what we add onto that is the ability to see compliance directly from a visualization tool. So you also have the ability to have multiple databases, so that's DynamoDB. You have a number of S3 buckets. So we have customers that have thousands of these resources that they're able to visualize. And then what we do is we're able to layer compliance onto that. So this is just one aspect of the tool. One of the things that this gives you is discovery of what you have in your environments. So we have a number of customers who have found orphan VPCs, orphan EC2 instances that they didn't know existed, S3 buckets that people have created that were accessible to the public. We hear a lot about the different breaches. But when you click on these little hazards, you actually get details of what's wrong with that particular bucket, how it relates to the different compliance values. So at a high level, we are helping you with your compliance posture. We also do codeless auto remediation. So giving you the ability to establish a baseline, which is essentially a snapshot of your configuration, your known good configuration, and then notifying you when there is a drift. So we talk a lot about cloud misconfiguration being the cause of a lot of breaches. We are able to notify you when settings change within your configurations. You can get a notification. You can also take it a step further by enforcing that baseline, which is essentially doing an auto remediation back to that original good state. So that's us in a nutshell. I don't have a whole lot of time, and I'm not a sales guy, so I didn't bring a whole bunch of slides, so forgive me for that. But if you wanted to find out more information about Fugue, Jared is our VP of Marketing. He's back there in a cool t-shirt. Also, you could go to fugue.co. If you wanted to try out Fugue, a trial of Fugue, you can do a 30-day free trial, fugue.co/go. You'll be able to scan and get a visualization of your infrastructure. And we're happy to work with you. So again, thank you all for coming. And thanks to the organizers, Department of Lab, for putting this all together. So thank you.
Cool. And thanks to Fugue again for the pizza and beer. They'll be hanging around, so if you guys want to chat with them afterwards, feel free to grab them, or if you want to again try out Fugue, recommend it. So we're gonna have Doug come up. He's gonna talk to us about aws-x-ray.
All right. My USB-C adapter is safe at home, so hopefully this guy will work. All right. Tough son of a gun. Thank you. I did my best. The Lightning and USB-C adapters look surprisingly similar, by the way, and really irritating. So, aws-x-ray, I'm going to talk about that tonight because I've become a big believer in it. It's something I started using some months ago, and I use it both at work and at home. I absolutely recommend it for a variety of reasons. Now, the kind of things I wanted to do tonight was go over what is it, why does it exist, why did I find it useful, how does it work, how can you use it, what's it cost, blah, 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 all them things, and do a demo. Now, I never do live demos, so instead I have screenshots of live demos of running stuff. The reason is it just messes everything up when you make a typo, it just slows things down, it's hard to zoom in, you get all distracted and all that. So anyway, we've got some screenshots in here of a couple little projects that I did to just demonstrate how well X-ray works. And I use it in a couple of different ways. And then lastly, I'm going to go over lessons learned, meaning the type of stuff where things I discovered after the fact I wish I'd known when I start, and in fact, wish I'd sat down and actually read about it before I just jumped right in there and went to town on it like I have a bad habit of doing. So, what is X-ray? X-ray is a way to metricize your stuff. Know what your stuff is doing, how well is it performing, gives you something to compare about. So this is directly from the AWS documentation. And basically what it's telling you is X-ray will watch your code, it can go in your code, or you can put it in your code, I should say, and it'll give you a nice metrics view of the kind of performance you're getting, how long it's taking to do something, some outside things you may not be aware of. And when I get to the Lambda example, that'll be a good one, because I've learned a couple of things while I was messing around with that. So the key thing is that with X-ray, you would use it across the board in development and in production. And the earlier you use it, the more comparison points you're going to get in the long run, and that's one of the big benefits of this. It's like everything with monitoring. Historical data is really important because it lets you see it's different now than it was yesterday. Is that good or bad? Those type of things. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. So reasons you might want to use it. First, metrics never hurt. It doesn't hurt to have metrics and not use them, but it does hurt when you're sitting there wondering why something's running slow all of a sudden. And you can go through log files, you can jump into CloudWatch, you can jump into metrics or logs in general, basically. Spend a lot of time looking in there, or you might be able to find easier ways to do it. Now, one of the other things that I really don't point out is there are commercial tools that do these kind of things. They tend to be on the expensive side, they tend to be licensed, they tend to be a big deal. They're also open source ones. I think, but I don't know this for a fact, I believe X-ray was bought some time ago and integrated into the service, but I'm not positive. I do know that it has proven very useful for me. Just because of the second statement on this, and that is insight into what an application, how an application is performing, and what it's doing, and if it's having trouble, without having to jump down into CloudWatch logs or find some other way to do it. There's surprising insights you can get from just looking at metrics sometimes. One of the key elements, as I said a while ago, is the comparison between now and yesterday. 5 minutes after deploy, 5 minutes before deploy. Did anything change? Did anything get better? Did anything get worse? Those are very useful things to do. And it's this aspect of the next to the bottom line. If it saves you any labor, it's worth the cost. And I'll talk about costs in here. Labor is something you can never get back. Time never comes back. It's all the time moving ahead all the time. You can spend a few dollars, but you can't recover time, unfortunately. That's something I've learned definitely. The last aspect of this is that one of the nice things about X-ray is you can control how much it's doing, how much data it's collecting, which is where the cost comes from. Meaning you could run this thing flat out, open bore, and run up some money, or you can just have it sample data, and I'll explain that in a bit, and keep the cost way down. So what does it cost to use X-ray? And by the way, X-ray's on the console. Just go in the console, look for X-ray, and that'll take you to it. So this is directly from the AWS page, again. And what it's telling you is that when data is collected, some amount of it's free initially. You don't get, I should say, you don't get charged. That's a better term for it. You don't get charged for some amount of data being sent in. You get charged after some amount. You also get charged after some point of looking at that data. So in other words, they're taking it in, they're keeping it somewhere, and they're letting you see it. Eventually, you got to pay for those things. But if you keep your usage low enough, it doesn't cost you anything, or it costs you like what it costs me, and that is a little less than 5 cents a day. And I have to admit, I have rarely used any tool that has turned out to be that useful from a monitoring perspective, with a little bit of labor that it took to put it in the code. That's the other aspect. I'm going to show some examples of that. So these things on traces on here, or data going in, data being stored somewhere, and you going in and investigating things, etc. So there is a cost aspect to it, but it's pretty freaking minimal. And this thing shows you what 24 cents can buy you sometimes looking at these things. Now, how does it work? So my usage is this. I use it both in Fargate, which by the way is one of the best things that there ever has been, ever, and Lambda. And then it doesn't work with step functions, and Step's not integrated with it, but that's need to be, but Lambda is. So those are the three things that I consider to be good things nowadays, that anything else is legacy cloud. So in my case, it's Python Flask applications running in Fargate. I started using Step, or I mean, I've been using it for a while. I started using X-ray in these just on a lark, actually, to see. hadn't heard about it until I stumbled on it one day. I thought, what's this? I said, look at it. How do you use it? What does it do? I threw it in, and in a short period of time, it started proving useful to me. And that's where you'll see a little bit more as to some of the value of it. So the little examples I have in here right now are one, our simple Python flash deal. Now this presentation is on one of my GitHub repos. It's Ducktoppin presentation-aws-x-ray, I think, something like that. There's a PDF of all the slides you're seeing in right here and some code. Now that code might work and it might not. So the warranty expired before I mentioned the name, the URL of the repo, so don't charge me. But the key thing is this. In the Flask application, it has some metrics in it, or has some metric collections in it, data being sent in it. That data is being sent to an X-ray agent or daemon. That daemon is sending it on to the X-ray service. Now I'm going to show a graphic in a bit that explains it, but that's what I wanted to show you, that's what the way the process actually works. Your data is being sent from your application to an agent somewhere. That agent somewhere is sending it into AWS somewhere, and it's being all aggregated and all the neat things that happen to it from that point on. So that's the Flask application. The next application is the Lambda one. Now, I started this Lambda one some time ago, and I was going to put more of it in here, but it just got too big to put it here. But the key thing about the Lambda one is that it's really easy to use X-ray with Lambda, and it even gets easier when you start putting some code in there. In fact, I'll show you some examples of that. You can also use X-ray with applications running on an EC2 instance, meaning you got to have an agent running on the instance. That agent's collecting data and sending it forward. That data being collected is coming from your application. So nothing's free, but it definitely is low intrusive. Lastly, you can take that agent and you can run it on your own machine. And as long as that agent has the credentials to get to the service, it'll set it up. So it can be used on non-AWS resources as well. So I have found this particularly useful and interesting. And as well, if you really got nothing better to do with your life, you can actually put the code in your application to do everything and not even have the agent run it. But I figure you probably got something better to do with your life than that. Now, this is the graphic I was talking about that shows what's happening. So what you're seeing right now on the left-hand side is your application. The application is doing all the neat things that it does. It's the X-ray instrumented portion of it is taking metric data, sending them on to an agent. That's what the next thing is on collect traces. That collect traces is sending them on to the X-ray service. That's what record traces is doing in AWS itself. And then you can view it on what's called the service map. And I'll show you some screenshots of that and some better explanation of it. And then lastly, you can sit there and eyeball it and learn all kinds of things from it. So that's what this is showing. If you see it from left to right, there's a series of phases that data goes through. Now the middle one, record traces, this is where you can dial up and down the amount of usage of it to keep your costs down to 5 cents a day if you want. So, or less than that actually. So that record traces and collect traces, you can definitely do major controls at that point. Now, this is the case that I found. As I said earlier, when I started using X-ray, I thought this is cool. 2 days later, we did a deployment, and all of a sudden, something slowed down by a second. I had some REST requests that slowed down by a second, and I was wondering what in the world is causing this slowdown. And I thought, oh, I'll take a look at X-ray. Son of a gun, there it was. It showed me exactly what had slowed down because I was looking the day before and the day after the deployment, and I mean, it just jumped out at me like somebody hit me with something. So it showed that we had some S3 accesses. All of a sudden, that slowed down. There was a reason for that, obviously. The key thing is it gave us really fast insight as to where something had slowed down. Not that just the whole process had slowed down. Postman was showing, hey, this request is taking a second longer than it was yesterday. And I thought, oh, X-ray said, and this is where it slowed it down. And that's the thing that was pretty interesting about it. So, on 3 other occasions, this did exactly the same thing in other ways. So once again, it gave me very quick insight into what had, not only what had changed, but where at a granular level that was, and I'll show that in a moment. Now, there are commercial tools that will do this kind of stuff with Java and other things that are serious things that are very introspective, and they do all kinds of cool things, etc. I tend to find that those are big deals, and they're not necessarily cheap. You gotta learn how to use them, you gotta configure them, etc. Whereas things like this tend to be easier, cheaper, and give you enough insight that is useful immediately. So, What I did was this. I got a Python app running in Fargate, simple flash jotter, does three things. It's S3, DynamoDB, SNSSQS, just a simple thing doing that. Then I got a Lambda function. That Lambda function messes with S3 and SES. Now, the Lambda function is an interesting one. This is one of the reasons I like Step and Lambda so much. So I bought a book some time ago that's in development, or whatever the right term is right now, and every so many weeks they send an email out saying, hey, here's an updated version of your book. In that, there's a Moby link, whatever the other ones are, I can't think of offhand, but anyway, that email contains links to the current version of the book. You download the file from that link, then you email it to your Kindle, and bam, there it is on Kindle app. Now, I was sitting on the bus one day going to work and I had my iPad, and I went, son of a gun, I can't download it on my iPad and then email it. Said I needed something that I wanted to take that email, I wanted to send it to something, have it go find the Moby file in it, link it, go get that Moby file, and then email it to my Kindle address. And that's what this Lambda function did, or does right now, and it works like a champ, and I'm really pleased with it. I'm gonna write it up as to how the thing works at some point. But it was a fun little thing, but again, that's an aside. It is also being used, or X-ray is also running or using it. So now, this is the other thing that I did with this Python app. With Fargate, you can go through the process like I do for real, which is cloud formation, creating task descriptions, creating services, etc., serious stuff and so on. But every now and then, what I really want to do is I want to run this Python app in Fargate right now. I don't want to do nothing else. I don't want to set up everything else. And I started using the Fargate CLI. I discovered this probably a month or 2 months or something like that ago. The Fargate CLI, when you run it, and I'll show some examples of it in a bit. When you run it, it'll look in your directory, it says, hey, I see a Docker file. All right, I'm gonna do a Docker build. All right, did Docker build, and then it says, all right, now I got that, I'm gonna push that image up to ECR. Then, it's gonna say, all right, cool. Now I'm gonna go run this as a task on Fargate. And bam, it works. So in cases where you want to do something quick, I would probably not use it for professionally at this point without really careful looking, but from a personal perspective, when you want to do stuff in Fargate, when you want to run containers, and you want to run serverless with Fargate CLI works like a champ. I've had 0 complaints with it so far. So, it'll use a default Fargate cluster, a number of other defaults in there that you can control, but it's just that idea of saying Docker file, run, Fargate run, and there you go. So anyway, and then with the Lambda function, I did it's so right now managed with the CLI because I'm too darn lazy to turn in cloud formation. But someday, and I was actually going to try to have a CDK implementation of it before I got here tonight, but I got a life, and that just did not happen. So this is one of the main things. Back on the subject of why we're here, that's X-ray. With X-ray, when you're collecting data in the X-ray console, there's something called the system map. The system map is what you're looking at right now. That's what you see when data is there. And what is on it is, this is the starting point for an application, a thing that's running. So in this case, this Fargate application, it's a task that's running, sitting out there. It does 2 different things. One, it messes with S3. It also blows up intentionally, so we'll get a chance to see what an error looks like in it. And then secondly, it actually calls the ECS metadata interface to get data about the Fargate cluster that's running in. So that's the thing you're seeing right there. Now those boxes, or those circles, you can click one of them and see the details of what that is. What this is showing you is the interaction of something with services or lambdas or whatever it is that's sitting out there. This is a simple case of it. So when you're looking at this on the left-hand side, you see service map, then you'll see traces, then you see analytics, which is relatively newish. On the right side, it's showing you what the metric data is coming from. Now on the top right side, it says last 5 minutes. So in the last 5 minutes, these are the traces that is collected. Now, this is the one problem that I've had with X-ray, and that is time frames on these. I tend to find hard to do. So there's a relative time frame that says the last 5 minutes, last hour, last day, or something like that. But generally, I want to look at a more specific time frame from yesterday to today, or something on that line. You can go into the UTC portion of it and put timestamps on there, or time ranges, I should say. They're limited for up to 6 hours, meaning you can only go as much as 6 hours worth of data. And I always find it hard to do this, and I still haven't figured out why it is that I just don't understand it really well, so I tend to look at stuff in the last so many minutes or hours, more so than anything else I've noticed. So it's the one area I don't have a good handle on how it works, or how to use it, I should say. Now, when you click on one of those boxes or one of those circles, that will take you to the traces that are being emitted from that thing, the X-ray data that's being sent out. So in this case, I clicked on the first one. It's saying, here's a URL. What that really is just saying the service invocation, the kind of starting point. It might be a URL, it might be something else. Now, notice to the right of it says how long it took for that thing to go in and out when the request went in, how many traces got collected, and whether it worked or not. At the bottom are the actual traces, and the list of traces, I should say. So at the bottom, this is saying X-ray collected 2 sets of trace data, 2 requests that were sent to this application. They're sitting down here right now. You click on one of those guys, and then this is what you see. And this is where you start getting some of the real value from X-ray. That is, first off, notice up towards the top, duration 418 milliseconds. That's how long this request took. I mean, if this is a very request-driven application, that's probably the case that you find most of all nowadays. How long ago this trace occurred, when this data was collected, 7 minutes or something like that. Below that is the actual execution, what it was that went on. So this is that last that part of the application called Hello World. Now notice, under it, I got get S3 data files. That's a function in my code. It also went to the ECS metadata service to get the cluster information, cluster name, and something else like that. That's what this is showing, and then it also went to S3 below that. So in other words, from that I can see what it was that it did. Along with that, you can see whether it was successful or not, how long those functions took. I mean, each one of those things, so the Hello World, the Fargate application itself, the task itself, took 418 milliseconds. It was all focused in this one function called get data files. The cluster metadata service, which is that URL you're seeing right there, took 4 milliseconds. And the thing below it, the S3 access, took 142 milliseconds. So, anyway, the point I'm trying to make is it begins to give you that level of granularity of what's going on in your code. To the right of that is a graphic view to break those numbers, or to expand those numbers into a view of time frames, basically. So the top is 407 milliseconds. The next thing below it is that function. Below that are what these other functions took. So the key thing I'm trying to point out here is that this is where you begin to get real insight. And once you have insight, you can then begin to do comparisons. So for example, in this case, this get a file thing that goes out to S3 to get something, it's getting a file that doesn't exist, so it's going to blow chunks right here. So notice the red exclamation mark on that. That's saying something bad happened in here. So that gives you a clue right away. I got a feeling something's going on with that. Now you could go into CloudWatch logs, you could do something rather, or you could mouse over that icon, and if you do that, you see this. You see a graphic saying what that error was. By the way, if you have questions or whatever, if anybody's used X-ray, which I wouldn't be surprised, I tend to find anytime I present, there's somebody out in the audience that does a lot more than I do, so I treat presentations as live wikis. So pass along information at any time, because sometimes I might be fibbing and you never know. So again, anyway, what was that? What happened on that little exclamation mark, that little icon? Mouse over it, you get what fault was, file not found. Meaning I went out to S3, I said, give me something that doesn't exist. So it blows up, that's what comes back. Let's go a little bit further. If you click on that, a pop-up appears that gives you 5 tabs worth of information that may or may not have something in them, depending on whether you instrumented the code or whether you added more information yourself. First, it's an overview of what what was going on at that time, meaning when did it start, when did it finish, how long did it go on, there was an error, false, or fault true, I mean. Let's go to the tab called annotations. So in your code, you can say, hey, X-ray, I'm processing this request, something bad happened or something good happened. Here's the file name I was working on at the time, or here was the request ID, or some contextual information, not just the fact that I was going to put it, but here's what I was doing at the time that it went on. So, again, in this case, I added an annotation to the code to say, what file name am I working on right now? hello.txt. Metadata. So you can also add metadata to a task, and you'll see this in a bit in the slides to show what it is, how it's actually doing that. In this case, metadata JSON object, have your whole request context in there if you want, or have whatever is useful at any moment in time to you that you might want to look at later on. Log messages and X-ray traces are notes to yourself in the future. Kind of view it that way. And I might or might not need this someday, and if it's there, I'm really happy. If it's not, I see, hey, I blew up trying to get a file, but I don't know what request I was processing when I did it. So I can go to Splunk or CloudWatch or Elasticsearch or whatever it is to go hunt it down. Or if I was instrumenting it, there you go. And you'll see how that actually works. And then there's the exception itself. So in this case, it was a Python exception. File not found, here was backtrace within. So it's just that idea of saving you a bit of time, giving you some information sitting in here that you never spend a lot of time with. Now Lambda will look a little bit differently, but fundamentally the same thing. So this is a Lambda function that you're seeing right here. This is my little email processor. Kindle filter email. It will run the Lambda will execute. That Lambda will go and get the file. The order of this doesn't matter, it's just that these events are what's going to happen. Go get the file out of this other guy's S3 bucket, go copy it into my bucket, do something else, get it from my bucket, then send it to SCS. That's what it is. So it's like there's a flow of things that are happening in here. Each of these are showing you how much time that function took, what it was, an identifier that lets you go find that function, and then again, click on any one of these circles, get that next level of detail. So Lambda X-ray is where it gets a little more interesting because you get much more insight into Lambda. So if you don't do a lot with Lambda, you probably don't realize some of the ins and outs, or nuances is a better term for it, in using Lambda. When you're looking at X-ray data for Lambda, it gives you quite a bit more information that you may not have been aware of. So for example, inside this is a traceable Lambda, dwell time, initialization, invocation. Those are all Lambda terms that are defined in the next slide, so I'm not, or somewhere shortly. So I'm not going to explain them yet, but they will tell you more about that Lambda, and they will not always be the same. The same Lambda running again and again. They get some different numbers in there, and the definitions you'll see next are going to explain that to you. So what you're looking at right here is this. This is a Lambda, ran one time, the temp of one, because Lambda may retry, just be aware of that, if it fails, I should say. Initialization, Lambda came up, you did something in your globals or whatever, some setup, and then the event processing started. Initialization time is your setup time, basically. Invocation actually kicks off, jumps into your handler, starts doing stuff. Get something from S3, that's why I get my function go getting it from the other guy. How long did that take? 3.4 seconds, because it went around the world to go get it. Then URL extractor. That's a function I have where it's actually Python package function, whatever you call it, that goes and looks through text to find URLs and then returns them in the list. So how long did that take? The URL extractor took 3.3 milliseconds. Then copy file. Copy the file from the other guy's bucket into one of my buckets. How long did that take? 24 seconds, whatever it is. Where did it go to get it? Then send raw email. That's SES function, photo function that will use SES to send your email out, basically. So anyway, how long did that take? Once again, this breakdown tells you everything that was going, how long everything that was going on in there, and all the big steps that happened within it. And the graphic, this is a better view of it right here, where you can see here's the whole time end to end, and here's a breakdown graphically of what's going to show.
So the green check mark just means it completed?
Yes, it did not blow.
So if there was a red X there, could you drill down to find out at that level?
Yes.
You could find out where it happened, but will it tell you what happened and how to fix it?
Well, how to fix it could be a little more challenging. But what happened is you got a bug or something happened outside you, such as you don't have access to this. You're going to see some examples of that later on, where I intentionally put bugs in here because I'm positive I've had bugs at some point in my life, probably when I was real young, I don't know, but anyway. But I'm really good at demoing bugs because I tend to have a lot of them. So you'll see that in a minute, and it'll show quite a bit more about it. And at the bottom it shows you the major functions you were dealing with. So with Python and photo library, X-ray instruments, and it instruments all your Bodo functions. So if you don't know what Python is, you probably don't know what I'm talking about. But if you do, it's good. All right, now let's keep going a bit further. Now, this is what I was saying. Those little terms that showed up in there: dwell time, invocation attempts, initialization. If you do Lambda stuff, it's worthwhile to know what these are, because they do matter. I mean, you've heard the term, you almost certainly heard the terms Lambda cold start or warm start, etc. Those kind of things. The dwell time or the invocation and initialization will begin to matter in those areas. So dwell time is the time that it took before it actually got into your Lambda. That gives you some insight into AWS, I think. I don't know, I'm not an expert in this. Invocation attempts. So you can have a Lambda that blows up and it may get retried. It may get retried again. And we'll have a graphic on that showing in a minute. It's useful to be aware of some of these things. So there's reasons it might fail that you actually do want to retry. But this is right from the AWS text or documentation. At the bottom of the slides where I got these things, by the way, I have the link to the actual place I got it from to make it a little bit easier to find it, because I have in the past had trouble going back saying, what was I thinking when I put that slide up there? So now, this was an interesting one. I could not figure out why my Lambda sometimes works, sometimes blew up with timeout. I'm saying, what in the world is going on? Why does it work sometimes? Why is it timeout? I had forgotten that when you create a Lambda, there's a default timeout of 3 seconds. So don't forget that default timeout, because if your code happens to run at 2.5 seconds all the time, which works just fine, and then you add a little bit more to it and it runs at 3.1 seconds, all of a sudden we'll start getting timeouts every now and then. We wonder what is wrong with my code. Why is this going on? And then I thought, oh, I bet when I created this by hand that I forgot to increase the timeout. So that's the key thing. Generally, during the cloud formation, I got my usual library templates. They're already ready to go, which means I've forgotten what's in the freaking things. So, and this was an example of exactly that. So, notice, it went over the timeout. That's what these 3 things are, the attempts. It did 3 retries. Each one of them blew up with a timeout or whatever that was that said it on there. So it said, all right, I'm going to give you another chance. It ran it again, blew up again, right at the 3-second level. So if it had been less than that, it would have been faster. So anyway, just useful things to be aware of in terms of awareness of what's going on in your architecture. Now, so you had a question earlier about the X, or the whatever it is. So this is 3 attempts, blue chunks each time. Somewhere here it actually says attempt 1, I don't know where it is. Anyway, so somewhere this was one of the attempts. Comprehend, fail. So I started experimenting with, instead of using URL extractor or whatever it's called, I wanted to try comprehend and have it pull out URLs for me. I hadn't given comprehend the role that Lambda was running, and I hadn't given it access to comprehend, so it was blowing up. So that's what was going on in here. I meant to do that. Be aware. So the error was this: remote fault caused by. No, I'm lying. See, I meant to do this too. Remote fault caused by text size limit exceeded exception. That's what this one was. Comprehend by default for synchronous has a maximum of 5K or text or something like that. This email happened to have 7K in it. Now, you can't expand that. You have to go asynchronous, but that's another subject entirely. So anyway, in other words, this error was told to me what it was, and I didn't have to do pretty much nothing on it. Now you'll see a little bit what I actually had to do. Each one of these were fails, all for exactly the same reason. I kept trying to call comprehend with 7K. Comprehend kept telling me, hey, I don't handle that. So that's what this is showing. Now, on that service map page, I'm sorry, yep.
So you set up your failover safety policy when it timed out?
The DLQ, no, I did not. I meant not to. I want to show it, but yes, I would like to do that. I did not for this demo, but it's been something I have actually never done, but I've read enough about it to know that I should.
So, but would it show you though, even though if
I don't know. It's a good question. I assume. That's a good question. I don't know. No, I intended on adding it for the demo and just never got around to it, but I'll try that. That'll be a useful thing to see. So the next thing on that service map page, like the third thing down, said analytics. Analytics gives you a broader view, a graphical view, that is, of what's going on. That's the page you're seeing right now. So inside this view, you can go in and drag your mouse or selection box over this, see zoomed in on time frame. So it's kind of like taking that trace data and giving it to you in a graphical view, showing performance with peak terms and all the other statistical things on it. I think this is a useful page. I still don't know squat about it, so I tend to just use the metrics and the simple traces when I'm doing something like this. Now, this is an example of Lambda. The red boxes are what are the X-ray calls or really X-ray related stuff that I added to it. Or actually, no, this came right from the AWS documentation. This example was right from AWS documentation. I just highlighted the things that were X-ray additions. So up at the top, import the X-ray libraries or packages or whatever. The next thing down, patch, that says go into the Bodo library and instrument the Bodo library itself. And Bodo for Python is what the AWS SDK is, just in a nutshell. So that was the overhead basically saying, make this guy use X-ray. Down inside of it, there's a begin subsegment, meaning I wanted to do something and I wanted to be able to call that out specifically in that graph or that page that showed the trace information where there's something called put object inside there. Then I call the S3 put object function. Then after it calls it, then after that it ends the current segment, or it adds the annotation. It adds the annotation. Then it says, okay, we're done with that subsegment. So in other words, I'm saying I'm about to do something. I can instrument at the gross level, or I can go down inside of it and say, here's a start and end block for something I really care about and may want to compare later on. It's that idea of comparison. Numbers by themselves don't necessarily mean anything, but comparing them over time may tell you quite a bit. And at the bottom, there's another put annotation. So again, that's that idea that those little 4 tabs that I showed earlier that had extra information, this is where it came from.
Annotations are available in which languages?
Yes, that's the X-ray SDK is available in at least 4 or 5 languages, but I'm not positive what they are.
So Java, Node.
Yes, definitely those and Go, and Python, and maybe something else. Right? Yeah, I'm not sure what the others are. So I've been so Python focused for a while now that that's all I got my mind on. So, but yeah, it does do more than just Python, obviously. So here's one of the main things about a Lambda that you may not have noticed. When you create a Lambda, whether it's on the console or my cloud formation or whatever, there's a choice in there that says enable tracing. That's actually X-ray. So even if you don't do any instrumentation in your code, if you hit this enable tracing, it will at least do the outer level stuff. I mean, it will give you X-ray data without having you do anything in your code. So I have always found this to be useful to turn on because you never know when you need it. And that's the reason. I just wanted to put that on here that on the console, for example, if you're creating Lambda, look down there about 3/4 of the way down, you may see this active tracing or enable tracing. Now, we're almost done, by the way. The Fargate CLI, I just wanted to show what it looked like to use it. So in that repo that I got where the presentation is, there are the sources that are in there. I'll show those in just a moment. When I wanted to run the Fargate task in that directory, I had the make file, which is, go do something. I messed with my camera. Wait a minute. The app itself is in there, and a Docker file. So notice, all this thing said was Fargate, that's the CLI. Task, I want to run a task, it's going to be called app. I want to put it in this subnet with this security group and this role that I've created, meaning I want this Fargate task to have access to these things. And it said, no problem, found the Docker file, did a build, did a push, did a task create, and there you go, that's all it took. That one line did quite a bit. So the Fargate CLI is a pretty impressive little thing. When you're done, or assuming that it's a task that's continued to run, I mean it's blocked waiting for something to do, you need to tell it to stop because you pay, with Fargate you pay for runs, basically. So in other words, don't run a task forever if it ain't doing nothing. That's right. Don't scale it up to 1,000 if you only need one of them. So anyway, I just wanted to show this. And at the bottom, it shows some of the other Fargate CLI things that it can do, like get information about the things that are running. So you'll see a little bit more of that in a moment. Now, the whole point was this. The Fargate CLI, its major functions are create Fargate tasks, services, load balancers, certificates. In other words, you can do an end-to-end REST interface with that CLI in a surprisingly small amount of work. It is a neat little thing to mess with. And again, if it sees a Docker file, it says, hey, I bet you want this to be a Docker image, I'll make it for you. So assuming Docker is installed, and so obviously it will do everything necessary. It will use defaults within your account. So you would probably not use this in, I tend to use it for quick tasks more than anything else. When I want something to run in Fargate or a container running in AWS, this is a really good way to do it. Now, here are lessons learned. In your code, wherever you make external calls, whether it's REST calls, external anythings or whatever, put that begin segment, end subsegment around that call, because that's where you start getting insight into how long that call took, basically. Anything that's compute bound. So for example, I've got some stuff that runs on the order of 17 minutes or so of heavy compute time. It's really nice to be able to see the metrics and compare them over time. That's what I found. Here's one thing that is not obvious until it happens to you. On that service map page, you saw hello world and something else. That sounds easy. Let's say you got 500 developers and all of them are doing stuff that's all in X-ray, and you see 500 hello worlds sitting out there. That's not necessarily helpful. So it's a good idea to name your stuff in some way that's associated with the project, an application, a person, something like that. So on that service map page, it makes more sense to you. Don't just think of your own little world. There's a whole lot of other people out there that might be using it, and that's where you get this clutter of stuff all over the place. So anyway, that's an aspect of it, is naming things in a way that makes sense later, that's relevant to your hunting around inside it. You can also filter things out. So for example, almost everything I do tends to be with CloudFormation, and it's create an environment, we'll call it environment A, and then create another environment called environment B. In other words, it's silos of a number of different services. Name your segments with that cluster name, that environment name, something, once again, that lets you visually filter down, or even on the console, filter down to exactly what you're looking for. Next thing down, make the sampling level easily configurable. So with that sampling I mentioned earlier, you can say collect every single trace. So if you've got a function that's being called a bazillion times a second, there's a crap load of traces going in, you probably don't need all of them instrumented. So that's a case where you can tell it, I want to sample 1 every 1,000 or 5 every 5 minutes or whatever it is. There's a variety of ways of configuring this thing, but you can tell it to dial down your sampling level so you're literally getting samples. Yeah?
Can you filter for just like samples that caught that has an error associated with it?
Yes, actually, on that page where it showed the URL or whatever it was, where we went down there, one of the choices on there was error code or error status or something like that. So sampling, you can't dial down. So the sample is just sampling every now and then. Visualizing or what you're looking at, you can tell it to go show you just stuff that had error returns. And you can do it way more sophisticated. And in fact, as usual, there's an API for X-ray, so you can actually call the service yourself and get whatever it is you want and do something else with it. You could go get that data and squirt it off to CloudWatch or some other entity, something along that line. Oh, plan to include additional metadata. Again, in your request processing, whatever you're doing, add a little bit of metadata. What requests am I working on? What's inside the content? Do whatever. In other words, add a little bit of contextual information to it to make it more easier to do something with later on. That's the key thing on it. Then decide what is actually a segment. What's the major thing you're doing? Is it like process one request and then subsegments? That's a segment. And then subsegments, right? It's little things in there, or so it's kind of deciding where do you want those metrics to relate to in your application, in your request processing, whatever. Lastly, don't instrument your health check path, because otherwise you're going to get a crap load of traces of health checks off ALB, and that's a lot of metric data that's probably not ever going to be any use whatsoever, and it can cost you money. So in that configuration where I had said that you could configure the sampling, you can also tell it, don't sample this, and that would be a health check path. That's an example of things to do. So links at the bottom. The presentation link is at the top. That's the repo with all the goodies in it. The next 4 or 5 things are stuff I found useful links to useful things about X-ray itself, how it works, how to use it with Python, developer guide, blah, 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 blah. Then the Fargate CLI, because it is a useful thing to know about. If you're messing with Fargate, the Fargate CLI is worthwhile to do. Lastly, Flask, Python Flask itself. So the code I was talking about is this. Let me pop out here. All right, let me show you what I'm talking about. So drop down in this guide. So in the repo, so let's just show the repo itself. That might be smarter. There you go. So the repo itself has got these files in it. The Docker file that I was talking about. How do you make a Python Flask application? Start with Python, add some Flask. Oh, this is the other thing. This is a useful thing to be aware of. So the thing that I could not do with the Fargate CLI is it will create a task with a container in it. The X-ray agent has to run as a separate thing. So when I use it for real at work, I've got a task with my application in it, and the X-ray agent has another container, so a second container in the task. There isn't a way to do that with the Fargate CLI, at least at this point. So instead, I had to run the X-ray agent in the container with the application. So that's why what you're seeing right here at the bottom, startup, that's a script that runs the X-ray daemon in the background, and then it runs my application. So that's the point I was trying to make in this. That's what this is saying right here, is go get the X-ray daemon, put it in the container itself. That's what that Docker file is doing. Let's go down to the startup script. This is what I was talking about right there. So when the task starts, run the agent, run in the background, use some little arguments to tell it what it is that it's talking to. Then run the actual application. That's what the guy at the bottom is, actually run the Python application. The application is this guy right here, app.py. This is the Fargate task that does a few things. Bottom. It sets up a signal handler to catch a sig term, so when ECS is going to go kill that thing, it'll go and do some cleanup, do whatever it is it wants. The rest of this is just simple code just to demonstrate errors or whatever it is, nothing special about it. Now, key thing to know about it is this. So in my real AWS account, it's one I've had for a very long time. It has some unusual aspects up to it way back when AWS accounts were one way, and now they're different in some ways. So in this make file, at the top, all you have to do to make this work probably is create a new account, create a role that has access to S3, CloudWatch, and X-ray. That's the task role it's going to run under. Create a security group that gives you full access to the thing from wherever you are, however it is you want to do it. Tell it what subnet you want to use. That will probably be the public subnet in your public or in your default VPC. You got to have Fargate CLI somewhere. And then this is all that's necessary. The point I'm trying to make is this is a little different in my old account. I have to actually use some different setup inside of it. Newer years ago, AWS accounts are a little bit different in terms of how some of these things are set up, and I forget what it is. But it's got something to do with the default VPC and therefore the default Fargate cluster. So there, I did not want to run forever tonight because I know you're tired of looking at my face. So questions or anything along that line that anybody's got? Is anybody else using X-ray? Because I do not see it mentioned nearly as much as I would expect to, given the value that I found from it and the little, literally tiny bit of cost that there are days where I don't pay anything for it. It's actually zero because we fall below that trace count and all the other things that are inside there. So yeah.
Are you aware of any third-party tools that are built on top of it?
No. I would not.
You can imagine having like almost like an IDE interface.
Absolutely.
Where you could debug a
live
app as if it were a monolithic.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's an interesting idea. I do know that something I was going to say that popped right out of that ear, or it was something. Oh, Container Insights. That's what it is. So ECS some time ago has turned on or allows Container Insights. You can get more granular data about your tasks of running your clusters or containers running your cluster. I have a feeling Container Insights is built on top of it, but I don't know that for a fact. That's just a guess. I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. So,
is this available on the GovCloud and FedRAMP?
good question. I don't know. That's a very good question. Never occurred to me with that. I've heard that question
I
before.
work for federal government and we are not supposed to do it, not FedRAMP.
I do not know.
Well, if it's embedded in AWS, and it's available in GovCloud, then it's inherently FedRAMP if it's available in the GovCloud. If it's not in the gov cloud, then obviously you wouldn't be able to use it.
But we have been hearing differently because Lambda has been existing and got outgrowth for a long time. But recently we got approval to continue to use it. Maybe there are some other security teams that are evaluating those new ones.
That's possible, but my experience has been, if it's in the gov cloud and it's built on the AWS architecture, it should have at least a, moderate level, FedRAMP approval.
Maybe. Thank you.
Yeah.
So when should we not use X-ray for debugging? What's a bad example for it?
I wouldn't call it debugging or as much as troubleshooting. I tend to view debugging as a live breakpoint and doing stuff like that. When you're troubleshooting, I have found it extremely useful. If you are, the only situations I could think of where you might not find it useful is if you were sending so many requests that you had to instrument all, well, useful, then it's just more cost, that's all. But the frequency of requests is where cost comes in. I'm very cost conscious. That invariably, when I was working with somebody, they always say, all right, AWS goes, so we got to move to Azure. Instead of, let's go find out why it's getting high, let's stop it from getting high, because Amazon provides all the tools you need to make your cost the minimal possible. You just got to know they exist and learn how to use them. So I guess one aspect would be possibly cost, but other than that, I can't think of any reason not to use it. Good question.
Is there anywhere around the cost or no?
Well, you just keep a local level. I mean, like I said, some days I run zero on it because there are X number of traces that you get for free, whatever, 100,000 or whatever it is per day. So if you don't send any more traces, that doesn't cost you anything. Yep.
Is it also able to send you notification when something goes wrong?
No, alarming is not built into it. So it is something you would still use CloudWalk metric for, I mean, if that's the approach you use. But X-ray in and of itself doesn't have an alarming capability.
So you have to use it in addition to.
Yes, you'd still have your alarms, your CloudWatch metrics alarm set up.
Gotcha.
Or check the log.
Or eyeball the alarm, yeah, one or the other. Yep.
Is there any external turn it on, turn it off, so when the application is running and all of a sudden there's a problem, you can turn it on?
That's where you change the sampling level. The sampling level can be controlled within the task itself, meaning, so for example, this class application is actually a config file in there that tunes it. You could also tune it at the console level. You can control sampling there. So the quick answer to your question is yes, you can have the application send all of it and then control at the system level, console level, how much you want to actually ingest. So yes, you can control it externally without changing your code. Yep.
So, piggybacking off of his question, because that was my question also, is there any associated overhead to having it run?
Good question. If so, I have not seen it. It is not intrusive into the application that I can tell. It is making, and every place where you see that begin subsegment call, it's saying, here's something. So there's certainly some overhead, but it is at the level of send a message out and when it's done, send a message when you're done. So it's not like some of those commercial tools that really instrument the snot out of the Java applications, for example, JVM. It's not like that. Okay. All right, yeah. Sorry, I'm running long. I didn't mean to.
So it can't do alerting, but can you create an output file that maybe if you have a Splunk dashboard, you can ingest that file and then use Splunk for the alarming capability?
You can use the API to collect that information. It won't push anything that I know of in and of itself. I don't think so. I think you would have to have something using the X-ray API to collect those metrics, and then that sends it on to Splunk. I think, but I've not tried anything like that, so I could be completely wrong. Yep.
So you talked about agents.
Yes.
Agents. What's your experience with them? Can they auto-instrument into the code, like at the byte level?
No, definitely not. The instrumentation, the auto instrumentation, for example, with the patch all that you saw in the Bodo call, that's saying go patch the Bodo library, and you can tell it to patch other ones, and you can actually code in other ones yourself. But the only one I've ever used is Bodo, so I don't know about the others. So it's not at the bytecode level, definitely not.
And the image that you said, it automatically pushed it to ACR. So was
Yes.
that an AMI
like Amazon AMI, that?
No, with Flash there's not, or with Fargate there's not. Remember, you're creating a Docker image, a container image, and pushing that, it's pushing that to ECR. So there's no AMI in that sense. So now the environment of an AMI will be one you might duplicate depending on what it is that you're doing. Right? Okay, sorry, I did not mean to go this long. So I get chatty on these subjects sometimes. Okay.
Thanks, Doug. So now is a good chance. We're not going to take a break. We're going to have Vin and Robert. Sorry, I'm terrible with names. They're going to get set up here. But if you need a beer or a pizza or a water, now's the time to grab it. Also important, if you need a bathroom, the men's room is, if you go out here, if you go straight down the hall, there's like a green sign. Women's room, I'm told, I've never been there, is around the corner, like if you go like past the elevators and then to the left and left, so it's kind of on the other side of the building. So good luck. I don't know, but yeah, it's over there. So these guys are gonna get set up, and we're gonna get fired up as soon as they're ready.
You can get 2 of the 3 of the 4. It's hard. I think for the first question, we spent about 3 to 5 minutes trying to figure out what they're looking for. And then the answers were very close. Oh my God, this is really hard. And then the next question, the same. And then the next one, and there's 65 of them for 2 hours. I didn't have and so there were some where they to get me into the sort of mindset of that type of test. Because if you a lot of these certifications I have, they don't have I was so frustrated. It's hard because I was at a cluster using AWS for 3 months, and I started to figure out how it works, but then I got reassigned, and then now I'm at a customer, but their whole plan is to deploy so I don't work with it, so I'm not really motivated. It's myself. But I studied for it. And then I came up short. And now I gotta figure out like where and
you're ready to start?
I think more
how many here have heard that have LinkedIn feeds where you read that Amazon does not like PowerPoint and they have their own way of presenting? How many of you have listened? I can assure you, if you work with any professional services with Amazon, they bring you a bunch of PowerPoint presentations, and that is what we do. I unfortunately have taken cue from that, and I do all my presentations using the readme.md files. So I don't have any slides. This is my presentation here. I'll be just walking through the GitHub page, and we'll kind of to give you an overview. This is an experience report of an hackathon that we attended in June. This is the AWS Public Sector Hackathon, and it's a 14-hour event in which you are given a problem and you are trying to bring up a solution. I did not form a team when I went there, so we formed a team, and as a team, I think we outlined that we wanted to have some objectives. So we said we are going to do something in AI, machine learning. Who doesn't want it on your resume, right? So that's a driver for that objective. We wanted to create something like a serverless solution. So that was our second objective, and then from a business perspective, we wanted to make something actionable so that it could be given back to the non-profit or the agency that was kind of there as a partner. And we wanted it to be a short-term solution because we wanted to do something in those 14 hours and not just give them a concept. So we wanted to have something there which is implemented as a solution. So the way that the hackathon ran was that they gave us 4 problems, and the team had to select one of the 4 problems and then kind of go on with it. So we kind of rejected some problems which were kind of voice bots. They were kind of focused on generating an Alexa skill or maybe a Slack bot or something. We also rejected a problem which was more like just a technical upgrade. They wanted to do something on the serverless stack alone, but not really a business problem. So given that, we decided to work with UNHCR challenge, and UNHCR challenge is the United it's a nations high commissioner for refugees. Yeah. So for refugees, what they wanted is they got a bunch of news articles which they had scraped from different news sources, and they wanted to build something which would engage Americans to support that cause. So they wanted an ability to establish a two-way communication between their agency and the American audience to be able to distribute these views and make it actionable for them. So again, we started with the idea phase. I call this, we have found the tech stack and let's get to it phase. So the simplest thing, we said that, okay, we have these news collections. They sent us a data set which had like about 20,000 articles. We said that we could just throw it into Comprehend and do some entity detection. So for those who have maybe not seen Comprehend, Comprehend is an entity detection service. And this is how it looks like. You send it a text input and then it kind of processes it to identify entities, identify key phrases, identify language, identify sentiments. So the approach that we had in this found the technology and now let's do it phase was that maybe we could just parse these news text, maybe collect some kind of a sentiment and then apply that sentiment and try to reach out to audience. Unfortunately, all the samples that we ran for, again, it is kind of obvious that these are stories about sadness, stories about violence. So most of these sentiments kind of hit out to be a lot negative. So they are at like a 0.8, 0.9 negative sentiment. So that could not be a categorization of the sentiment. The other approach that we kind of thought of at that moment is maybe we could target the country and try to, based upon the country that the story is related to, we could maybe target that as an audience. But so these were the two approaches that we took. Unfortunately, as we kind of started evaluating this data more and try to run through some of these problems, this was for a few of the problems, right? So one, it did not resonate with the problem statement because I think the problem statement clearly said that they wanted to reach out to Americans. Now I know this country is diverse in terms of nationalities, but we still want to kind of keep that problem statement in our mind, is that we want to resonate with Americans. They wanted to be an actionable, which I think this was, again, the sentiment as in just the sadness or the negative sentiment was not making it a lot actionable. And the third and the worst part of it is that when we went back to the client, they said we have already done it. So that did not really work in our favor. So again, that's the time you go back to the drawing board. Again, agile practices at its best, as I say, that you go back and rethink your strategy and then see what you can do. So going back to the part, we said that engages Americans in support. So at that point, one of the team members said that why don't we categorize people into personas? And we can maybe categorize all these individuals into personas, and based upon a persona, we can maybe target a story. So what I mean by that is somebody, we just kind of listed what are the things that people relate to. Like as an individual with 2 kids, I do relate with anybody who has a family. Somebody who has kind of experienced violence or abuse would empathize with violence as a category. Religion, health and well-being could be some of the other personas that an individual could be categorized into. And then if we could translate these stories into that persona, it could resonate with the audience effectively. So with that in mind, we basically again went back to comprehend. And I knew that one of the challenges was that comprehend out of the box does not give any such information. Again, we saw that it just gives you key entities, but comprehend has now come up with something called as a custom entity model detection, where you can train the comprehend system to categorize data based upon your training data feeds. So I think one, we had to do a custom model development. So we decided to rely on custom comprehend model. And the other thing was, again, the problem statement said actionable donations. So we actually went back to the client, and the client said that they had categorized their donations into certain things like Gift for Refugees, which is a website here, and you could categorize that into different sections as somebody who is going to donate 10. So again, we are back in the idea phase. We decided to do some sprint planning. So again, this is a hackathon. We do want to leverage all our best practices that we do at work, so we did not want to give up on that part. So we said that let's do a model development. Let's just slot some time for model development. Categorize the news article based upon a custom model. We decided to create an integration endpoint, which is preferably a React app. And third thing is we wanted to put together a proposal for the business, which will basically something that they could take back to their office and then kind of improve on that idea. Again, I have a column here which is called fallback. So again, an agile principle where you fail early. So again, at that point, I just told the team that if we cannot get this model development to work, we might as well pack up bags and just watch presentations and go back home. So from an integration endpoint, we wanted to do React front end, but if we cannot do that, then maybe we could expose an API which they could consume in their client, maybe like a Salesforce environment or something. And the PowerPoint deck is something that all the AWS folks do love to see, so we decided to present that. So on the slide deck, I have kind of outlined this URL here, which talks about how to do custom lists. But in our case, as I said, what we did is we prepared a document. So we prepared a document with this data. I hope you guys can see, but it basically runs through a certain set of words and categorized as the 4 persona categories that we decided to work with. So this is what I would consider in a typical machine learning or environment as the training data. So this is how you can train the model by giving it certain words that you are looking for and then categorizing them into the custom category that you want it to map it onto. So it is then followed by setting up a custom classifier on the AWS comprehend console. So that is where you send this data over, and then it does the comprehend console allows you to ingest it. Unfortunately, again, this is not a demo kind of a setup, because this does take about good 7 to 10 minutes to process a certain file. Again, it has some limitations on the file size that you can submit. It is, I tried to submit a file with 20-25 rows and it did not work, so I just had to do a good 12,000-15,000 line file that I had to submit to the comprehend model for it to recognize and categorize. And once the comprehend model is created, that is when you can run the job using the start entities detection job CLI. So this basically takes a data input file, and then it generates an output file which it also throws back into an S3 bucket, and that is where you can fetch it from. So now that we are done with training and now we are trying to use the model, we found that for the same string that I have posted here, it did a much better job of categorizing the data of certain keywords into the persona or the categorization that we were looking for. So here I think for the string it basically said that family, huts, orchards, spaces were all kind of categorized into the family persona, and this was kind of a lot promising than what we saw before, because before it was just about Amazon defined models, and now it was more about the entities that we were looking for in the data. So at this point, I knew we now had something that we could maybe throw into a DynamoDB and kind of access it from a front end, but we still needed a front end, and I think it was again a time crunch. I think we were running at about 4 o'clock, which is maybe 6 hours away from the deadline, or 4 hours away from the deadline. Some of the challenges that we ran into is that these modeling takes a lot of time. Yeah, go ahead.
So was it mandated by the hackathon that it had to be a serverless solution?
No, I think it is again an out of interest that we felt that maybe we could build a serverless solution. So again, for a serverless solution, I know Doug here spoke about Lambda function, and he had this idea about cloud formation templates. I personally like the serverless application model, which I think is promoted by somebody within AWS, but now I think AWS has also taken ownership, and now they support it in their as a service in their console. So serverless application model, just open this link here, is a open source project which has got a significant following, and it lets you create an API gateway or a Lambda-backed API gateway endpoint in via the command line in less than 30 seconds. It lets you provision runtime of your choice. I can maybe demonstrate that real quick here, but if I do a SAM init /help, yeah, it lets you do a runtime, and if you look at the runtime list, it is kind of extensive. It almost does all the runtimes that are supported by Lambda. And the other good thing is that you can also do I don't know, type here. So this will basically create a project structure. This is your Lambda. It gives you test cases. It gives you an entire code set. And the other benefit is it comes with a README file, which will give you complete instructions about the deployment process. So it lets you package and code and test and complete CI/CD pipeline for your serverless applications. So again, it's a fast way to get you started on your Lambda function code, and also lets you write your code in your preferred IDE. So that's my advertising speed for the serverless application model. So I think now that we had this API gateway and Lambda function configured, which was reading from the DynamoDB, we then we wanted something that we would like to demo to the tech group of the judges. So let me just power this up. So this is my API endpoint, which is actually taking a payload for a persona categorization of violence. And if you look at it here, the idea is that it gives you a news article, which is one of the news articles from the dataset that they provided. It gave you a donate link, which is the actionable cause that we wanted the reader or the target audience to work with. And then there is the story, which is a snippet of the story that is being sent to the user. And similarly, I have one for family. So somebody with a family, here we are saying people being displaced. So this kind of relates more with somebody who is like a family oriented persona than somebody who has kind of suffered abuse or violence in his past life. And so finally, we did also set up a pitch presentation for the judges. So I'm going to let Robert walk us through the presentation that we put together for the judges. So I do have PowerPoint.
So the PowerPoint was done for the judges, not necessarily for Amazon. So even though we were at Amazon, so a few things. It did take us a little while going back and forth with the customer to make sure that we understood what their presenting problem was. And as we went back and forth with the team multiple times, this is a nonprofit organization, meaning they need to have funding. They need funding from individuals who care about these causes. They kept using the word engagement with us. The problem that we kept running into is we didn't understand what engagement meant. Because to them, engagement, they want people to care about the cause, but what is the tangible action behind that? And that's where we took some time going back and forth with the solution to make sure that we understood that we needed to come up with a solution leveraging the tools that we had that could integrate well within their own environment. So the concept of persona was something that resonated very closely with them because they were already familiar with the customer relationship management system. They knew the idea that certain people respond to certain stories, and then as well as the infographic we were talking about, the call to action, that actually takes you to a donation mechanism that should cause a reaction. So individuals that are more engaged with violence, they'll see a donation that goes to an area where the UNHCR is talking about violence. So that's kind of why we focus so closely on making sure persona technically doesn't really mean much, but in the case of the business customer, that's where we focused. So again, nonprofit organization, they're serving the need of helping people that are displaced from their country, and it's all nonprofit. So everything we did with them is to ensure that we focused on their need. They need resources to do their job. Again, personal story, engagement. They said this word to us, I don't know how many times, all morning they kept saying engagement. We're like, explain, what does engagement mean? Because it's something different for me. So that's where we eventually got to the whole idea of persona, and then we heard about the personal stories, and this is where the customer opened up, and then that's where we started looking at the solution, because they already had an API that provided them a basic sentiment analysis. So then we decided, how about a solution that furthers that and allows you to take the adoption of custom definitions of sentiment analysis much further, and also integrate it within your own solution. So back in your own team, you would be able to say, well, now our focus is of Syria, now it's another crisis that has to have attention and has less conversion over to it. So that's why we chose this approach, and then it continued to lead us to something that they can take on themselves.
So I think as I already spoke, this is the recognizer, which is the setup of that file that we set it with all the categorization that we wanted, and we let it process on the AWS complaint, and that is when we ran the and that is what we ran the entity's job, And as you see, this kind of gave us the categorization based upon the persona that we were looking for. And as I said earlier, the score was used to target the persona who wanted the story or article, but we also wanted to give them something that they could take back. Now, I do a lot of DevOps for my work, so I love pipelines. So we wanted to set up like a data pipeline for them to kind of go ahead and expert, because I think we did not set up everything in this diagram, but we wanted to tell them that they could use this aws-comprehend, and then further the result goes into an S3 bucket. From there it could be picked up by an ETL service like Glue and then pushed into the DynamoDB, and then the API gateway and Lambda serverless solution could get the DynamoDB and fetch data and present it to the user. And the best part is, because it's now an API endpoint, the channel could be Facebook, the channel could be a CRM, the channel could be just plain email. So we could basically just expose them to multiple channels by using an API gateway endpoint. This again is the snapshot that I showed you from the, yeah, go ahead.
So how do you gather the persona? That's the basis of your...
So persona gathering is something that is kind of a popular arrangement in the CRM tool. Again, this is something that they might have, and again, there could be some kind of analysis upon someone's Facebook post over a period of time, which helps them categorize that. Right. So this is something that they might have to own in their CRM system beforehand.
Maybe based on previous donations.
Previous donations, yes. That should be one way of doing it. So this is the postman screens. Again, I think this is where we are saying that from a channel perspective, it could be an email or a Facebook page. I think we can outline some of the improvements. We were being measured on these factors, so I'm going to let Robert kind of talk about. So there are 5 factors on which the judging was happening. So one of them was social impact and value.
So this is where we actually spend a lot of collaboration and understanding our business customers' operation and how this would be integrated into their environment. The big criteria was to make sure that they can actually own this on their own, because they may not actually have dedicated staff. Their members have volunteer work. So the social impact, we did want to explain. These articles do cause action. They do cause people to cause donations, and donations do allow your operations to run. So that's where we make sure that every single thing that we talked about in this solution with them would be something that they can take on and adopt on their own. So originality is, we did take on how they actually do their customer relationship management inside their organization. So that's where the family, the violence, these are words they used with us when we were engaging with them. And then all we did was pick up on that and said, okay, well, if we do sentiment analysis and here's the rules engine to run this, can you adopt a better, continue to improve and iterate on this approach? And obviously they said yes, they shook their heads, they were in agreement, and that's why they were asking so much. And then how much is it actually going to cost to implement this? It's all Lambda, it's serverless, it has a very low capital expenditure to set this all up. They had all the prototype code, everything was operational, so they could look at it. Usability, this was also talking about how it integrated with their current tools. They were using, I think, Salesforce. Yeah, they were using Salesforce, so we were trying to make sure whatever we proposed to them, we wouldn't have to rip out and replace anything else. So we wanted to give them a solution that will have them to develop. The engagement, we didn't get to see because we had prototypes, so we don't know how much actual conversion they had to donations, but no. That's it. Go to market strategy, they took it.
Yep. So, what do you guys think? Should we win? Should we lose? Someplace?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we did win. Congratulations. We won in our category and we came a close second on the overall 17 teams that were participating in the hackathon. Unfortunately, we did lose to a voice bot. So the bots are coming. So that, but it was a fun experience. Again, going back to my presentation, again, I would say that the 2 featured AWS services that we would love to talk about is that is AWS-comprehend. I think the whole idea of being able to do custom entity modeling kind of extends the capabilities of an out-of-the-box machine learning service, and just not rely on what Amazon thinks just not rely on Amazon's ML model. So that is a good extension that is being offered. And serverless application model, I know a lot of people do here like small Lambda functions and do DevOps, and there are infrastructure engineers who are trying to write code. So I would definitely encourage that if there's something that you want to take back from this talk is SAM init --help, and please go ahead and try to write your Lambda functions in the IDE of your choice instead of writing it on the AWS Lambda console. So again, yeah, go ahead.
I think it would be interesting to see if they have used it, what have been the result rates, and putting that into a model and see how we can improve over time. So like what a contextual machine learning model where you have a feedback loop, and you know that feedback loop
I want to see what
eventually
you guys
improves.
consider the feedback. I mean, after the first round of campaign, and you will see how effective your model is and how this machine learning or AI part can get involved in, how would I say that, progressively improve your.
So I mean, we have not heard from them since August. I think last time we spoke to them, we don't know if they've implemented a mechanism to determine feedback. We just don't know.
Was it built flexible enough that the action made or a donation or like sending an email or something to the congressman or representative? Is it adaptable and built phase or only defined for donation?
So the way it is built right now, it is kind of for a donation to an individual. But I think it could be extended to a congressman, but again, the model is kind of for an individual contributor. That is where the whole model has been set.
In the custom definition, if they did have like a .mil or a government address, raise it to a different level. So it's extensible enough where we can add additional definitions, and that's what the hope was. As they matured with this, they would determine other personas. This person's donated several $1 million or several $1,000 to this cause over the past 20 years. We should target this individual and what's important to them, or the organization that's important to them.
Could you show that graph again? Just scroll down a little bit. I see this. You use the AWS glue here. How do you do that? Use as an ETL tool or something?
So AWS Glue is an ETL tool because the AWS comprehend model throws your file into an S3 bucket, and from that S3 bucket maybe it could be picked up by the AWS Glue ETL tool and then translated into the Dynamo. And because I think the output of that file is kind of significantly large, so maybe there could be some ETL that to be done on it. You could as well have a Lambda listener on the S3 bucket, and then use that Lambda listener to push data into the Dynamo.
Why I'm asking is like I have different ways to use Glue. Is we have archive data into S3. And then we want to use Athena to query directly, but then there's if we don't use Glue, there's a manual step. You can if you know the JSON format, you can create your schema, your data camera. But use Glue, you can automatically detect.
Right.
You schedule. And you scan your data, and then you see what your schema is. But yours using Glue is different. You get information from the S3, and then ETL clean it, transform it, and then put it into the Dynamo DB.
Right. So again, this is again a futuristic solution. We did not get to use Glue on the setup. But we did envision the importance of Glue there for some time ETL to support. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes, so I will put the GitHub link on the Meetup chat.
Cool. Perfect.
The Meetup is still alive.
Yeah. Yeah, hey, thanks guys for coming. Yeah, we'll get both those presentations, the links posted on the Meetup page, so you should get notified about it, so you guys can see all that. Thank you guys for presenting, we appreciate it. So a couple wrap up things here real quick. There is still some pizza and beer if you want to take some. I'm not suggesting you drink and drive, I'm suggesting you drive in a closed container and drink when you get to your destination. Also, you can take a whole pizza with you because there's a lot of pizza out there. We moved into the right outside here. Is anyone hiring? No. Sorry for the. Oh, we do have a few positions. Someone over here yet?
Yeah, I work for Nose Board, we're always hiring, I mean, it does,
So over here, he's gonna be over here if you wanna hang out for a minute. Anyone who's looking for a position, also the few guys are around if you wanna talk to them. Really appreciate you guys coming out. Anything you guys need for me, if you wanna talk,